The rescue ship cut through the darkness of space like a knife through water. Captain Laura stood at the front of the bridge, her eyes fixed on the small dot of light growing larger on the main screen. Somewhere out there, floating in the wreckage of a destroyed transport vessel, was a survivor, one single life sign among twisted metal and broken dreams. "How long until we reach them?" Laura asked, her voice calm but urgent. 7 minutes, Captain," replied the navigation officer, a young named S whose blue fingers danced across the control panel. The Wandering Star was not a military ship. It was a colony vessel, carrying supplies and personnel between human settlements and allied alien worlds. But when a distress signal came through, everyone answered. That was the law of space. That was the code that kept civilization alive among the stars. Dr. A stood in the medical bay, preparing for the worst. The physician had seen many things in 40 years of practicing medicine. Radiation burns, decompression injuries, the terrible things that happened when organic bodies met the cold emptiness of the void. I had 4 arms like all, and each one moved with purpose as medical equipment was arranged on silver trays. "What species is the survivor?" I asked through the communication system. "Human," came the reply from the bridge. "Male, adult, that is all we know." I nodded, though no one could see the gesture. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 80 years ago. They were curious creatures, warm-blooded, bilateral, with internal skeletons made of calcium and phosphorus. Their biology was well documented but still held surprises for physicians trained on other species. The rescue team consisted of 4 crew members in environmental suits. They crossed from the Wandering Star to the wreckage using a flexible connection tube, their magnetic boots clicking against metal with each step. The destroyed transport ship had been torn nearly in half. Cargo containers floated freely, spinning slowly in the zero gravity. Emergency lights blinked red and orange, casting strange shadows across the broken corridors. "Life sign is strong," reported team leader through his helmet radio, moving toward the signal now. They found the human in what remained of the cargo hold. He was sitting on a metal crate, his legs dangling over the edge, looking almost relaxed despite the destruction around him. His name, they would learn, was Danny Cole. He was 34 years old, a cargo specialist who had been traveling to a mining colony when his ship encountered an asteroid field that the navigation computer failed to detect. "Hey there," Danny said when he saw the rescue team. "Boy, am I glad to see you folks." Stopped walking. He had expected to find someone injured, possibly unconscious, maybe even dead. Instead, he found a man who looked like he was waiting for a bus. "Sir, are you injured?" asked. Danny thought about it for a moment. "Probably. The crash was pretty rough, but I can walk, so that's good." The rescue team helped Danny through the connection tube and onto the Wandering Star. He moved slowly and noticed that the human winced several times during the short journey, but he never complained. He never asked to stop. He just kept moving forward, one step at a time, until they reached the medical bay. Dr. A was waiting. The physician stood nearly 7 feet tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow slightly under the medical lights. 4 arms hung at A's sides, each one ending in long, delicate fingers designed for precise surgical work. Large eyes, 2 primary and 2 secondary, examined the human patient as he entered the room. "Please lie down on the examination table," A said, gesturing with 2 of the 4 arms. Danny climbed onto the table with some difficulty. Now that the immediate danger had passed, his body seemed to be reminding him of what it had been through. Every muscle ached. Every joint felt stiff and wrong. But he had survived. That was what mattered. The full-body scanner hummed to life, sending invisible waves of energy through Danny's body. The machine could see everything, bones and organs and blood vessels, building a complete picture of the patient's physical condition. Dr. A watched the holographic display form above the table, expecting to see the usual crash injuries. Bruises, cuts, Maybe a concussion. What appeared on the display made the physician take 3 steps backward. By the endless void, a whispered. The holographic image showed Danny Cole's skeleton in perfect detail, and that skeleton was broken, not in one place, not in 2 places, in 17 places. 3 ribs on the left side showed clear fracture lines. The left arm had 2 breaks, one in the forearm and one near the elbow. The right wrist was cracked. Both legs showed damage with 4 fractures spread between them. The pelvis had 2 breaks. And the spine, the delicate column of bones that protected the nerve cord, had 5 microfractures scattered along its length. I had seen asteroid miners with fewer injuries after being caught in cave-ins. This human should be unconscious from pain. He should be screaming. He should be dead. Instead, Danny Cole was looking at the ceiling and asking, "So, Doc, how bad is it?" A's 4 hands began to shake. The physician pressed a button on the wall, calling for the entire medical staff to report immediately. Within minutes, the room filled with doctors and nurses, all of them staring at the holographic display with expressions of pure disbelief. "This is not possible," said Eth, the junior physician. "No creature could survive this level of skeletal damage." Danny turned his head to look at the gathered medical staff. He saw their faces, saw the fear and confusion in their large alien eyes. Then he looked at the holographic image of his own broken body. "Oh, that," he said, as if someone had pointed out a stain on his shirt. "Yeah, some of those are pretty old." The room went completely silent. Every present stared at the human with the same expression. It was the expression of scientists who had just discovered that everything they knew about the universe was wrong. "Old," I repeated, the word coming out as barely more than a breath. "Sure, the ribs are new, I think, probably from the crash, but the arm thing that happened when I was a kid fell out of a tree, and the leg stuff, most of that is from when I used to play football." Danny paused, thinking. "Actually, I think the wrist might be from a motorcycle accident. Hard to remember exactly." Dr. A walked slowly toward the examination table. The physician's 4 arms hung limply at the sides, all strength gone from them. In 40 years of medicine, I had never encountered anything like this. A patient discussing multiple severe bone injuries as casually as one might discuss the weather. "Mr. Cole," I said, speaking very carefully, "you have 17 bone fractures in your body. Several are actively healing. Others show signs of being years old. I need you to tell me something honestly." "Sure, Doc, what do you want to know? How are you alive right now?" Danny Cole considered the question. He looked at the holographic image of his broken skeleton, then back at the assembled crowd of horrified alien physicians. And then, despite the pain that shot through his damaged ribs, he laughed. "I guess I'm just too stubborn to die," he said. In the corridor outside the medical bay, Captain Laura received a message from Dr. A. It contained only 4 words, but those 4 words would change how the entire ship viewed their unexpected human guest. The message read, "Humans are not breakable." The medical bay of the Wandering Star had never been so crowded. Word had spread through the ship like fire through dry grass. There was a human in the medical bay with 17 broken bones, and he was awake. Not just awake, but talking. Not just talking, but making jokes. Dr. A had called for additional staff, and now the room was filled with physicians, nurses, medical students, and several crew members who had invented reasons to be there. They stood in a half-circle around the examination table, watching Danny Cole as if he were some rare and dangerous animal. Danny, for his part, was starting to feel uncomfortable with all the attention. "Listen," he said, trying to sit up and then stopping when his ribs reminded him why that was a bad idea. "I appreciate the concern, but I've had worse." This statement caused a visible reaction among the medical staff. 2 of the nurses made sounds of distress. Eth, the junior physician, had to leave the room briefly to compose himself. Dr. A simply closed all 4 eyes and took a deep breath. You have had worse, I repeated slowly. Worse than 17 bone fractures. Well, maybe not more fractures at one time, but the motorcycle accident was pretty bad. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks that time. Danny paused, remembering. Actually, the football injury was worse in some ways. I tore my knee ligament and broke my ankle in the same play. Coach was pretty upset about losing me for the season. I pulled up the human medical database on the nearby computer terminal. The physician needed to understand. There had to be something in human biology that explained this impossible resilience. Some genetic modification, perhaps. Some cybernetic enhancement that was not showing up on the scanners. But the database showed nothing unusual. Danny Cole was a perfectly ordinary human male. No genetic modifications. No cybernetic implants. No special treatments or experimental procedures. He was simply a member of a species that treated severe bone injuries as inconveniences rather than emergencies. I want to show you something, I said, pulling up comparative data on the holographic display. This is the bone structure of a. The image showed a skeleton similar in basic design to Danny's, but with clear differences. The bones were thinner, more elegant, with a slight translucent quality. They looked like they had been carved from crystal rather than grown from calcium. Our bones are hollow, I explained. This gives us greater agility and allows us to move with precision. It also means that a single fracture can take 6 months to heal, during which time the patient must remain completely immobilized. Danny nodded, genuinely interested. That sounds rough. Now look at this. I changed the display to show a cross-section of a human bone. The image revealed a dense structure, solid and heavy, with a complex internal network of tissue. Human bones are solid. They are heavy. They limit your movement and require more energy to carry. But they also heal rapidly and can withstand impacts that would shatter the skeleton of any other known species. Yeah, bones are pretty tough, Danny agreed. I mean, not tough enough to stop a motorcycle from running me over, but tough enough to put back together afterward. A medical student named is raised a trembling hand. May I ask a question? Go ahead, Danny said. When the bones break, what happens to the blood vessels and nerves nearby? Do they not suffer damage as well? Oh, sure. There's usually bleeding and swelling, and it hurts like crazy for a while, but the body takes care of it. White blood cells clean up the damage, new tissue grows to replace what was lost, and eventually everything goes back to normal. How long does this process take? Danny thought about it. Depends on the bone. A small fracture might heal in 4 to 6 weeks. A big break like a femur can take 3 or 4 months. My arm, the one I broke falling out of the tree, took about 8 weeks before the cast came off. The word cast required explanation. Danny described how human doctors wrapped broken limbs in hard shells to keep the bones aligned while they healed. They listened with a mixture of horror and fascination. The idea of simply wrapping an injury and waiting for it to repair itself was completely foreign to their medical philosophy. Among my people, I said, a broken bone requires surgical intervention. We must carefully reconstruct the damaged structure using synthetic materials and growth accelerators. The patient remains in a healing chamber for months, unable to move, while the bone slowly regenerates. That sounds expensive, Danny said. It is. A single bone fracture can cost more than most families earn in a year. It is why we are so careful. We teach our children from birth to avoid any situation that might lead to physical harm. Running is discouraged. Climbing is forbidden. Contact sports are considered a form of insanity. Danny laughed, and this time he managed to stop himself before his ribs hurt too much. Man, you would hate Earth. Kids there break bones all the time. I think I knew maybe 3 people growing up who never had a fracture. Only 3. Yeah, and we all thought they were just lucky. The medical staff exchanged glances. The cultural implications of what they were hearing were staggering. a species that considered broken bones normal, a civilization built by creatures who damaged themselves regularly and simply continued functioning. It explained so much about human behavior that had previously seemed incomprehensible. Doctor approached the examination table and looked down at Danny Cole with new eyes. "I need to ask you about pain." "What about it?" "According to our instruments, you should be experiencing severe pain right now. Level 8 on the Galactic Standard Scale. Yet you appear calm. You are making conversation. You even laughed several times. How is this possible?" Danny considered the question seriously. "I mean, it hurts. Don't get me wrong, but pain is just information, right? It tells you something is wrong. Once you know something is wrong, you deal with it. Getting upset about the pain doesn't help anything." I was quiet for a long moment. Then the physician said something that would be recorded in the medical logs and eventually shared across the entire galactic medical community. "Among my people, pain is feared above almost anything else. We structure our entire society around avoiding it. But you speak of pain as if it were merely a message, something to be acknowledged and then set aside. This is not resilience. This is something else entirely." "What would you call it?" I looked at the human, this broken creature who refused to acknowledge that he was broken, and spoke a word in the language that had no direct translation. The closest approximation was something like the madness of continuing. Danny smiled. "I like that. We just call it being stubborn." Over the next few hours, the medical staff treated Danny's injuries as best they could. They applied healing accelerators to the fresh fractures, gave him medication for the pain that he insisted he did not need, and wrapped his ribs in a compression bandage. Throughout it all, Danny remained awake and engaged, asking questions about physiology and sharing stories about human medicine. By the time the treatment was finished, Dr. had reached a conclusion. Humans were not more advanced than other species. They were not smarter or stronger or faster, but they possessed something that no other species in the known galaxy seemed to have. They possessed the ability to be broken and continue moving forward. They possessed the gift of refusing to stop. And that, I realized, was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. 3 days had passed since Danny Cole arrived on the Wandering Star. In that time, he had become something of a celebrity among the crew, who had never spoken to a human before found excuses to visit the medical bay. They brought gifts of food and drink. They asked questions about Earth, about human culture, about the mysterious species that could break its own bones and keep walking. Danny accepted the attention with good humor. He was not used to being treated like something special. Back home, he was just a cargo specialist, a working man who moved boxes from one place to another. But here, among the stars, he was apparently a miracle. Dr. visited every morning and every evening. The physician was fascinated by Danny's recovery, which was proceeding far faster than any model had predicted. The fresh fractures were already showing signs of healing. New bone tissue was forming at the break sites. Danny's body was literally rebuilding itself while he sat there eating sandwiches and asking if anyone had a deck of cards. On the 4th day, something happened that would become legendary among the medical staff. Danny decided to get up. He had been lying on the examination table for 4 days. His back was sore from the position. His muscles were stiff from lack of use. And despite having multiple broken bones in his legs, pelvis, and spine, he felt an overwhelming need to move around. "I need to walk," he announced to no one in particular. Ed, who had been assigned to monitor Danny during the day shift, looked up from the medical reports. "I'm sorry." "Walk, standing up and moving your legs. I need to do that." "Mr. Cole, you have fractures in both legs. Your pelvis is damaged. Your spine has 5 microfractures. Walking is impossible." Danny was already swinging his legs over the side of the examination table. "We'll see about that." What followed was a scene that would be described in medical journals for decades. Eth called for Doctor called for additional staff. Soon, 6 medical professionals were standing around Danny Cole, begging him not to stand up. "Please," said, all 4 hands raised in a gesture of pleading. "Your bones are not healed. If you put weight on them, they could break further. The damage could become permanent." "Doc, I appreciate the concern, but if I don't move soon, I'm going to go crazy. We can provide entertainment, music, visual programs, social interaction." "That's not the same thing. My body needs to move. It's been 4 days." Danny placed his feet on the floor. The cold metal sent a shock through his system, waking up nerve endings that had been dormant. He took a breath, felt his damaged ribs protest, and stood up. The pain was immediate and significant. His legs screamed at him. His pelvis felt like it was made of glass. His spine sent sharp warnings up and down his nervous system. But Danny had felt pain before. He had felt it many times, and he knew something that they did not seem to understand. Pain was temporary, giving up was permanent. He took a step, then another. His left leg dragged slightly because of the fractures, and he had to adjust his gait to compensate. But he was moving. He was walking. 4 days after a crash that should have killed him, he was walking across the medical bay on 17 broken bones. The staff watched in stunned silence. Eth was recording everything on a medical device, knowing that no one would believe this without visual evidence. Doctor had simply stopped trying to intervene, recognizing that this human was going to do what he wanted regardless of medical advice. Danny made it to the window on the far side of the room. Outside, the stars drifted past in their eternal dance. He placed one hand on the cool glass and looked out at the universe that had tried to kill him. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said. Approached slowly, standing beside the human at the window. "You should not be able to do this. Everything we know about biology says you should not be able to do this." "Yeah, well, humans are good at doing things we're not supposed to be able to do." "Why? What drives you? What makes your species push past limits that would stop any other creature?" Danny thought about the question. He thought about his grandfather, who had worked in the coal mines for 40 years with lungs full of dust. He thought about his mother, who had raised 4 children while holding down 2 jobs after his father died. He thought about every human who had ever faced impossible odds and decided to keep going anyway. "I think it's because we don't know any better," he finally said. "We're not smart enough to understand when we should give up, so we just keep trying." "That is not stupidity, that is something else." "What would you call it?" I considered the question for a long moment. "I believe I would call it hope. The refusal to accept that the present situation is permanent. The belief that things can improve if one continues to struggle." Danny nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess that's part of it, but there's something else too." "What?" "Spite." A's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. "Spite. Sometimes you keep going just because you don't want to give whoever's trying to stop you the satisfaction of seeing you quit. The universe tries to kill you, and you survive just to prove you can. That's spite." The concept was foreign to philosophy. Their culture valued harmony, acceptance, and working with natural forces rather than against them. The idea of surviving purely to defy the thing that tried to destroy you was almost incomprehensible. But watching Danny Cole stand at the window, his broken body held upright through sheer determination, I began to understand something important about humanity. They were not a peaceful species. They were not a harmonious species. They were a species at war with the very concept of defeat. Every human carried within them a tiny spark of defiance, a voice that said no to the universe whenever the universe said stop. And that defiance, that stubborn refusal to accept limitations, was perhaps their greatest strength. Danny turned away from the window and began the slow, painful walk back to the examination table. Each step hurt. Each movement reminded him of all the things that were wrong with his body, but he kept going, because that was what humans did. When he finally reached the table and sat down, he was breathing hard and sweating from the effort, but there was a small smile on his face. "See, Doc, nothing to worry about." I looked at the human, this creature who treated survival as a personal challenge rather than a fortunate outcome. "Mr. Cole, I have practiced medicine for 40 years. I have treated hundreds of species, and I have never met a patient like you. Is that good or bad? I honestly do not know." That evening, Doctor began writing a report that would eventually be submitted to the Galactic Medical Council. The report was titled Observations on Human Physical Resilience and Pain Tolerance. It would become one of the most widely read medical documents in galactic history, changing how physicians across the stars understood and treated human patients. But that was in the future. In the present, Danny Cole was lying on an examination table, 17 broken bones slowly healing inside him, asking if anyone knew any good jokes. The observation lounge of the Wandering Star was quiet at night. Most of the crew had retired to their quarters, and the great ship moved through space on automatic systems. Through the wide windows, stars glittered like diamonds scattered on black velvet. It was the kind of view that made living creatures feel small and significant at the same time. Danny Cole sat in a cushioned chair, his body propped up with pillows to take pressure off his healing bones. Across from him sat Doctor, the physician who had become something between a doctor and a friend over the past week. Between them was a small table holding drinks that neither had touched. "I asked to speak with you privately," began, "because I have questions that are not appropriate for the medical bay." "Ask away," Danny said. "I'm not going anywhere." "That is precisely what I wish to discuss. Your willingness to remain stationary during recovery. It contradicts what I have observed about human behavior." Danny shifted slightly, trying to find a more comfortable position. "What do you mean?" "Since you arrived, you have demonstrated an almost aggressive resistance to being still. You walked on broken legs. You refused pain medication. You appear frustrated by the healing process not because it hurts, but because it requires you to stop. That's just how it is. Lying around doing nothing makes me feel useless." I leaned forward, all four hands clasped together. "But why? What is it about your species that demands constant activity? Among, rest is valued. Stillness is considered a virtue. We have meditation practices that involve remaining motionless for days at a time." Danny considered the question. He had never really thought about why he felt the need to keep moving. It was just something that had always been part of him, part of being human. "I guess it goes back to evolution," he said finally. "On Earth, the creatures that survived were the ones that kept moving. If you stopped, something ate you. If you rested too long, another tribe took your hunting grounds. Survival meant action. But your civilization is advanced now. You have technology. You have safety. The threats that drove that behavior are gone." "The threats are gone, but the instinct isn't. Thousands of generations of our ancestors survived by refusing to stop. That's in our blood now. It's in our bones." Danny laughed softly. "Even the broken ones." The conversation paused as a crew member passed through the lounge on their way to another section of the ship. When they were alone again, I asked a question that had been building for days. "Tell me about human families. What about them?" "I have reviewed human cultural records in our database. Your species forms strong social bonds. Parents remain connected to children throughout their lives. Extended family networks span multiple generations. This seems related to your resilience." Danny nodded. "Family is everything, or at least it's supposed to be. Not everyone gets a good one, but most of us have people we'd do anything for." "Give me an example." "My grandfather," Danny said, and his voice took on a softer quality. "He worked in the mines his whole life, dangerous work. He breathed in coal dust every day. By the time he retired, his lungs were shot. Doctors said he had maybe 5 years left." What happened? He lived for 23 more years, pure stubbornness. Said he wasn't going to let some dust tell him when to die. When I was a kid, he taught me how to fish. When I was a teenager, he taught me how to fix engines. When I was an adult, he danced at my sister's wedding, even though every breath was painful. I was quiet for a moment, processing this information. He continued to participate in life despite his condition. He did more than participate. He lived. He laughed. He made everyone around him feel like things were going to be okay, even when they weren't. That's what humans do. We carry on for the people who depend on us. And if there is no one depending on you? Danny smiled. Then you carry on for yourself, because you're worth it, because tomorrow might be better than today, because giving up means letting down everyone who ever believed in you. The stars drifted past the window as the ship continued its journey. In the silence, I considered everything Danny had said. The physician had spent decades studying biology, understanding how bodies worked and why they failed. But human resilience was not purely biological. It was something more complex, a mixture of physical toughness and emotional determination that seemed unique in the galaxy. I have another question, I said. It may be personal. Go ahead. During the crash, when your ship was breaking apart around you, what did you think about? Danny was quiet for a long moment. The memory was still fresh, still raw, the sound of metal tearing, the violent shaking that threw him against walls and consoles, the moment when everything went dark and he knew with absolute certainty that he was going to die. I thought about my sister, he said finally. She's getting married next spring. I'm supposed to walk her down the aisle because our dad's gone. I thought about missing that. I thought about her standing there alone. And this thought helped you survive. It gave me something to hold on to. When the ship stopped spinning and I realized I wasn't dead, I made myself move. I found a pocket of air and I stayed there, even though my body was screaming at me to just close my eyes and give up. I stayed awake because I had to be at that wedding. I understood something then. Human resilience was not about ignoring pain or pretending that damage did not exist. It was about having reasons to continue that were stronger than reasons to stop. It was about connections to other people, obligations to the future, dreams that had not yet been fulfilled. Your species is not merely tough, I said slowly. You are purposeful. Every human carries within them reasons to keep living, and those reasons give you strength beyond what your bodies should be able to provide. I never thought about it that way, Danny admitted. I just do what I have to do. That is precisely my point. For you, survival is not a choice. It is an obligation. You do not decide to keep living. You simply cannot imagine doing otherwise. The night cycle continued, and the two sat together in comfortable silence. Outside, the universe stretched on forever, cold and indifferent to the small ship moving through its vastness. But inside that ship, a broken human and an amazed alien shared something that transcended species. They shared understanding. Doc, Danny said eventually, can I ask you something? Of course. When I get back to my people and you go back to yours, are you going to tell them about me? About what you learned? I considered the question. I am required to file a medical report, but I believe I will also write a personal account, not as a physician, but as someone who has witnessed something remarkable. What are you going to say? I looked at the human, this ordinary member of an extraordinary species, and spoke with complete sincerity. I am going to tell them that I met a creature who refused to die, not because death was impossible, but because living was too important to give up on. I am going to tell them that humans are not defined by what happens to them, but by what they choose to do next. And I am going to tell them that if they ever meet a human, they should treat them with respect. Because anyone who can carry 17 broken bones and still smile is someone worth knowing. Danny was quiet for a moment. Then he reached out and placed his hand on A's arm, a human gesture of connection that the had learned to recognize. Thanks, Doc, that means a lot. You are welcome, Mr. Cole. Now, I believe it is time for your evening medication. Do I have to? If you want to walk your sister down the aisle at her wedding, yes. Danny sighed, but he was smiling. Fine, but I'm not taking the strong stuff, makes me too sleepy. I helped the human back to the medical bay, supporting him when his legs threatened to give out, adjusting their pace to accommodate his injuries. And all the while, the physician thought about the report that would soon be written, the one that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity. It would be called The Psychology of Human Survival. And it would begin with a simple sentence. Humans do not survive because they are strong. They survive because they refuse to be weak. 3 weeks after the rescue, the Wandering Star arrived at New Austin, a human colony on the edge of explored space. The planet was small but beautiful, with green forests and blue oceans that reminded many of Earth. It was home to about 50,000 humans and a small number of alien residents who had come for trade or scientific research. Danny Cole stood at the main airlock, waiting for the doors to open. He was wearing his own clothes now, the ones that had been salvaged from the wreckage of his ship. They had been washed and repaired, though they still showed signs of what he had been through. Burns around the edges, tears that had been stitched back together, much like Danny himself. Dr. A stood beside him, along with several members of the medical staff who had come to say goodbye. 3 weeks was a long time in space, and relationships had formed. Eth, the junior physician, had become particularly attached to the human patient who had challenged everything he knew about medicine. Your fractures are still healing, A said, a final warning before departure. You must rest, you must take your medication, you must avoid strenuous activity for at least another month. Danny smiled. I'll try, Doc, but no promises. I am serious, Mr. Cole. Your body has done remarkable things, but it is not invincible. If you push too hard, you could cause permanent damage. I know, and I appreciate everything you've done for me, all of you. Danny looked around at the gathered, these alien beings who had saved his life, and then watched in amazement as he refused to act like a patient. I know I wasn't easy to deal with. Eth made a sound that was roughly equivalent to a human snort. You were impossible, but also fascinating. I'll take that as a compliment. The airlock doors opened, revealing the colony beyond. New Austin was busy today, with people and vehicles moving in all directions. The air smelled of growing things and machinery, that particular mixture that meant civilization. And there, at the bottom of the boarding ramp, a small group was waiting. Danny recognized them immediately. His mother, her gray hair tied back and her face showing the worry of weeks without news. His brother Pete, tall and solid, with the same stubborn set to his jaw that Danny saw in the mirror. And his sister Lisa, the one getting married in the spring, already crying before he had taken a single step. He walked down the ramp. It was not easy. His legs still ached. His pelvis still complained with every step. His ribs reminded him of their presence whenever he breathed too deeply. But he walked because his family was waiting, and no amount of pain was going to keep him from reaching them. His mother got to him first. She wrapped her arms around him and held on like she was never going to let go. Danny hugged her back, feeling her shake with sobs, knowing that she had spent 3 weeks imagining the worst. I'm okay, Mom, I'm here. When they said your ship was destroyed, I thought. She could not finish the sentence. I know, but I'm okay, I'm home. Pete came next, clapping Danny on the shoulder in that way that brothers did when they wanted to show affection without being too emotional about it. You look terrible. Thanks, I feel terrible. Good, maybe you'll finally learn to be careful. Danny laughed, and this time his ribs only hurt a little. Not likely. Lisa was last. She stood in front of her brother, tears streaming down her face, unable to speak. Danny opened his arms and she rushed into them. I thought I lost you, she whispered. Never, I made a promise, remember. I'm walking you down that aisle. You can barely walk at all. I'll be ready. By spring, I'll be dancing at your reception." Above them, on the observation deck of the Wandering Star, Dr. A watched the reunion. The physician had seen many things in 4 decades of medical practice, but never anything quite like this. A family coming together. A broken man refusing to show weakness in front of the people who loved him. A group of humans demonstrating everything that made their species unique. Eth came to stand beside "Do you think he will follow your instructions?" Not for a moment. He will push himself too hard, too fast. He will take risks that any sensible creature would avoid. He will probably re-injure himself within a month. Then why let him go? I considered the question. Because that is what humans do. They make choices that seem foolish to others but make perfect sense to them. They prioritize connection over safety, purpose over comfort, living over merely surviving. And you admire this. I am terrified by it, and also, yes, I admire it deeply. The medical report was filed the next day. It was thorough and clinical, documenting every fracture, every treatment, every remarkable aspect of Danny Cole's recovery. The report would be read by physicians across the galaxy, shared in medical schools, debated in academic journals. But alongside the official report, Dr. A wrote a personal account. It was not required, it was not requested, but it felt necessary. The account began with the moment when Danny Cole first arrived on the Wandering Star, sitting upright on a stretcher with 17 broken bones, asking if anyone had a deck of cards. It described his refusal to acknowledge his limitations. His insistence on walking when walking should have been impossible. His conversations about human culture, human families, human hope. The account ended with the scene at New Austin, the family reunion at the bottom of the boarding ramp. It described how Danny had walked down that ramp without assistance, every step an act of defiance against his own broken body. It described the way his mother held him, the way his brother gripped his shoulder, the way his sister cried into his chest. The final paragraph of the account would become famous. It was quoted in speeches, included in textbooks, carved into monuments. It read, "I have studied medicine for 40 years. I have learned the limits of flesh and bone, the boundaries beyond which living things cannot pass. But watching Danny Cole walk down that ramp to embrace his family, I understood something that no medical text had ever taught me. The limits of the body are real, but the limits of the spirit are whatever we decide they are. Humans have decided that their spirits have no limits at all. And that is why, among all the species of the galaxy, they alone seem capable of the impossible." 6 months later, Danny Cole walked his sister down the aisle at her wedding. His bones had fully healed, leaving only faint lines on medical scans to show where the fractures had been. He wore a suit that had been specially fitted to accommodate the slight changes in his posture from the accident. He smiled the entire time. At the reception, true to his word, he danced. It was not graceful. His body still remembered what it had been through, and his movements showed it. But he danced anyway, holding his sister in his arms, celebrating her happiness and his own survival. Across the galaxy, Dr. A received a message. It contained a video file showing a human male dancing at a wedding, moving stiffly but with obvious joy. The accompanying text was simple. "Doc, I made it. Thanks for everything, Danny." I watched the video 3 times, then saved it in a personal archive. The physician had examined thousands of patients over 4 decades of practice, most of them blurred together in memory, their faces and names fading with time. But Danny Cole would never be forgotten. He was the human who refused to be broken, the man who walked on 17 fractures because his family needed him, the patient who taught an alien doctor that the most important organ in the human body was not the heart or the brain. It was the spirit. And human spirits, as I had learned, were the strongest things in the universe.